Hi friends. Okay, so this time I'm gonna talk about like the vote of it all. I'm gonna apologize. It's been a couple weeks, partly because I was sick and I was trying to get all the information. Make sure I tell you guys correct stuff. Um, Second thing, I'm not an expert. I'm just gonna share the information how I understand it. Maybe you learn something, and that's really cool. Hope you do. Third is I may or may not have bias. I may or may not talk about stuff in a specific way, and I apologize for that as well. I'm human. I apologize. It's all humans. Anyway, to start the story off where we left off. 1973. And it all starts in Austin, Texas, and that is important in what I'm going to call our historical setting. Austin, Texas, it actually moves up to North Texas, where the big court case happens, and then of course all the way to Washington to the Supreme Court. Another thing that I'm going to talk about are the people, give or take, and I'm going to call those historical actors because everything in history is happening always all at once. History is being made every day. So I'm picking the people, because they already picked, to talk about for this history. Those people are evil Wade guy, evil as in he is theoretically the bad guy if we're looking at um, helping women, the thing being challenged sort of thing. Everything is a good guy. Cool. We're going to talk about Linda Coffey and Sarah Reddington, who are the lawyers in that case. We're going to talk about Sarah Hughes just a little bit because she was the judge in North Texas. And then we're going to talk about Jane Roe, or Norma McCorvey, because she's very important because it's kind of about her. But first, we're going to talk about the University of Texas, because that's where all this starts. And there were two women who are also part of our actors, Judy Smith, um, who did like Peace Corps stuff, wanted to help women. A lot of women did at this point. And then Vic or Victoria Foe, and they wanted to make Austin from a group, so they did. And they probably did this thing called, oh man, it just involves a lot of talking. I will get on it later because my mind just blanked about what it's called. It basically feeds your mind to talk about your experiences and find out that other people are like you. Surprising, similar experiences. Anyway, so because of that, there was a lot of slut shaming, and they tried to stop that. There was a lot of misinformation about sex because of how the system, education system, was controlled. So they tried to talk about that. So they made this really cool hotline and a newspaper called The Rag, which is also another name for a period, probably to be funny. Also because The Rag is another name for a newspaper. Connotations are cool. And so what happened was is they were working out, and it wasn't just them. There were other people too. They were working out of a YMCA, and then they would get all these questions about how to get abortions, safe abortions, all that crazy stuff. Well, they couldn't do anything because abortion was illegal in Texas, and that's not good for the point of the story. So they decided to try to do something about it. Came up with a tried to find their best way, gave a list of abortionists in Mexico, and then they would drive there for safety. Mind you, that they could be arrested for helping them. And then other groups were doing this as well, clergy, because they were upset with the carnage that botched abortions, and all this other stuff was happening in hospitals. Doctors were for this at this point too, because women died. Women are people. Women died. Fetuses at this point were not at all considered people. So the woman's life is actually really important because that's her life, and the woman is a person, which is a concept we're still working on. So because of all of these crazy things happened, with passwords, liabilities, and bail funds and stuff like that. Now we're going to talk about Sarah Reddington, who at this point was pregnant and at this point could not get a job because she was a woman And you'd be like, oh, Jane, what do you mean by that? There were 40 women out of 600 in the class that she was in the college, grad school she attended, and how they would gatekeep women out of the law profession would be they would only call on men so the women could not practice laws. If women cannot practice law or get recommendations from the teachers, I'm not 100% sure how being a lawyer works. I don't necessarily care to. Um, you couldn't get a job. Men wouldn't study with her, so these women actually had to be like super duper cool. And my notes are saying that she was UT. She was at UT, but she couldn't get like a job practicing, and that's really big important. Um, well, so they wanted to put a court together to fight Roe. Vic Foe is super important because they tried to lobby for this. It doesn't necessarily work, but Sarah Weddington is like, oh man, I want to help, and I want to practice, so I'm gonna do that. So they start looking at North Texas. Her and her buddy Linda Coffey, and they do North Texas because they found a friendly judge up there. Because as we talked about historical setting, that's important because they need to make sure that it can get passed or at least challenged so it can keep moving on. We were talking about overturning laws. It's a process. You pick your judge, you pick your courts, you pick your people, which is also important because Norma McCarty was a white woman, and that is also very important. And I'm saying this because people like Rosa Parks, who had lighter skin, and she was older, working class, so you could sympathize with her. Theoretically, the white audience could sympathize with her. There was another woman who tried to sit on a bus like Rosa Parks. Actually did it before she did, but she had darker skin, was 13, and was pregnant. So she was not the type of people the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was looking for. Surprise. Mostly because of the pregnant underage thing. Colorism does have to come into it too. I will talk all about that later. I just have a lot of information. I want to make sure that y'all are getting it. And I have time to give it. So they look at this really nifty court case from 1965 called Griswold versus Connecticut. And basically it says that married couples can plan their own families, which means married couples can also decide whether to not have kids. And that does not necessarily mean carrying a kid to term. It means that it is up to the man and wife to decide what they do. Which also has some sexism because the man shouldn't necessarily be involved when you talk about a family. Families are crazy. And so Weddington realized that there's a right to privacy and healthcare in this because not married couples aren't just the most important one, but a woman is because the second you get pregnant, you're theoretically starting a family. Therefore, even though that there's not a man involved here, so Norma McCorvey walks in. McCorvey. She already has 2 kids. She's been in and out of abusive relationships, and she may or may not be a lesbian at this point. I understand that she was, but as I've talked about, terms are really loose. But to our knowledge, she was a lesbian, and she is pregnant with her 3rd kid, and she cannot afford this kid because she cannot afford the other 2. This is partly why she's and so she agrees to be Jane Roe. And so they argue in front of the Supreme Court. And there's some really interesting things to look at here. Mostly because in the first semester they do not care at this point. That a woman does not matter and her healthcare does not matter because they don't know. It's a surprise. And not until the second trimester doesn't matter because now it is another life involved, and protecting health matters, but in the interest of the woman and like her right to have privacy, and you can't limit access of healthcare based on that. So you can be like, oh, you're pregnant. No, there could be a lot of other things that are wrong, or other things that are going on. You can't just be like, wow, you're pregnant. Lastly, 3rd trimester, the state wants to protect this potential life, which is still true today, and it can restrict access because of that. There's some issues with that, mostly because things that nowadays are considered abortion at that time are actually life-saving things for the women who are pregnant. No woman who makes it to the third trimester and decides not to abort their child actually wants to lose their child. They actually wanted to keep that child. I just want to point that out. But a lot of stuff was rooted in eugenics, um, which they were also worried about. And that kind of takes me to my next topic a little bit, which is the story of the Ralph sisters. Though obviously, when we have right to privacy, women can get abortions, and women can also choose to have kids, like the story of the Ralph sisters, which was published in 1973, so the same year as Roe. But what happened was these two sisters decided their mom wanted them to get a appendectomy, but she was illiterate and she was from the South, as in like Alabama, that sort of area. I think it was Arkansas specifically. I'm not 100% certain. So what happened is their illiterate mom, under no fault of her own, signs the paper for them to get appendectomies, and they do, and they also get hysterectomies. And so these two children, which are 13 and 14-year old, will never be able to have kids because the government decided, or a doctor decided, that they should not, which is rooted in white supremacy, and this was very common amongst African American or Black. People, as well as indigenous people and also Puerto Rican people. My notes say that indigenous women had so huge 80% were sterilized, which is a ridiculous amount. I understand nowadays hysterectomies are hard to come by. Then it was a tool of white supremacy and may or may not be in the future again. Who knows how the future is going to get handled. So that's all I got on the happening of Roe. If there's other things that you want to know, you want to learn more about the court case, feel free to Google it because it's actually some of the other things, how they argued, all of that stuff. Also, I might talk about eugenics a little bit more next time. And I'll definitely be talking about feminism because I need to talk about conservative women and how we started to look against, how people started to work against abortion and how it actually started to get framed. And the answer to that is Phyllis Schlafly. I don't like her. And that's my biased opinion. And it's the right one. So, friends, rest in love and take care of yourselves, please. Please.